Welcome to the Career Jiu-Jitsu podcast, where we connect the art of Jiu-Jitsu with your career. Our mission is to empower and inspire you with engaging conversations and valuable insights from people just like you who benefit from the shared relationship between your workplace and the art of Jiu-Jitsu, leading you to a more fulfilling. Thank you for tuning into the Career Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Frank and I are very excited today to tap into the world of telecommunications. We have a telecommunications expert with us today. So if you do jiu-jitsu, and I've seen a lot of times we going into like a cell phone store, retail store, and I always wonder, what is this person's life like outside of working in this type of world? And I think it's great for our listeners to be able to hear the perspective of somebody that is in telecommunications and its connections to jiu-jitsu, because the person that we have today is Joe Giannone. He is a brown belt at the Renzo Gracie Academy in Middletown, New Jersey. And he's been training since 2008. So he's been training for 18 years. It's a long time on the mats. So he's going to be able to share a lot of great insights into the connections between jiu-jitsu and his career in telecommunications. He is a senior manager of distribution for a telecommunications company. And so he is managing a lot of people, big sales teams. So he has a lot of experience in working with sales and working with people that are trying to just make their grind work for the day, and there's going to be a lot of connections into how that all works. So welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you guys this morning. When I got a chance to see what you guys are doing with this, you guys are unlocking something here, because there's absolutely the intersection between what you learn on the mats, how you process that information, and how that equates to your career and your career progression. So I'm super excited to tap into that this morning.
Well, we definitely appreciate that testimonial. And there's going to be so much. We were just talking on the pre-interview, Joe, that there's just so many connections between your experience on the mats and your experience in sales, because there's so much failure in both. And it takes so much gumption, tenacity, stick-to-itiveness to continue when the odds are against you. And in sales, a lot of times there are things out of your control, the economy, you have goals that are set by somebody else that you need to achieve. And you're always looking at, what can I control? How can I handle this challenge? And how can I hit my targets? And when you fall down, how do I get back up? There's so many connections. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I'd like to get started, Joe, with tell us a little bit about how you got into the sales business and how you've grown into a leadership position in that business.
Yeah, thank you. So if you believe in the sort of butterfly effect, I will tell both of you this story. I had graduated college in 1999, did not know what I wanted to do, was not sure. I knew that I had drive and motivation to kind of move forward. And I had been told earlier in my life, hey, you'd be good at sales, and hadn't given that really much thought. I was doing a little bit of landscaping, and I happened to be in the Rockaway Mall in northern New Jersey one particular day, and just walking down this one corridor, and there was a kiosk in the middle of the mall selling cell phones. And I saw the former president of my fraternity there working. And he was a guy that we had a lot of respect for, which is odd in a fraternity, but his name was always spoken with reverence, right? And I walked up to him and I said something like, hey, what's up, Mark? How are you? And he said, hey, what's up, man? How are you? So what are you doing here? And he goes, I work here. I said, yeah, but it's in a mall. Something like that. Some sort of dismissive shrug. And he said, I made $80,000 last year. And I looked at him and I said, give me an application. And that's how the story started. And I've said recently to people, had I walked left in the mall instead of right, or had he been on break, or had he had his head turned, I might not have seen him. That conversation wouldn't have happened. And so it was sort of a moment that was at the time happenstance, but sort of profound for me. As I got that application and I started to kind of work my way through that sales process early on, in my career. So that's kind of how it got started. with me.
And so when you began in that career, that is a very salesy job. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges you faced, the learning curve, what skills you developed, and what problems you had to overcome?
Yeah. So, at that time, we're dating ourselves here, right? But we went the entire sort of landscape for that was going from analog to digital. And the challenges then are very different from the challenges now. I mean, they're the same in the context of a challenge, just different, right? Sort of apples and oranges. So at the time, it was, network issues and how you were trying to work with pricing and switching different sort of rate plans and all these different things that were going on. And at the time, you were giving people loaner phones and I literally remember my first day. You speak about challenge. I was in the store and they had a call out or something, and I was standing there and they were like, "Just talk to people." Okay, so literally the first person that comes up to me, I now remember this vividly. She says, "I have a problem with my phone and it's your fault." It was literally like the first conversation. So that was my introduction on sort of day one. So you think about like,
Baptism by fire, right?
yeah, you think, yeah. And that's, by the way, that's a lot of it. Baptism by fire really kind of encapsulates a lot that happens in these roles. But that's kind of how it initially started. And so trying to make adjustments, trying to understand things, we didn't speak about emotional intelligence. We didn't speak about all the things that, the contemporary leadership and training curriculums kind of go through nowadays. There wasn't any of that. So to your question, and to the assertion of difficulty, you had to kind of figure it out on your own. And through those sort of trials of conversations, you start to learn how to talk to people. Being from the area, kind of understanding how people think and operate helps you to sort of, tap into how they operate with how you operate, right? So if they speak fast, you speak fast. A lot of the nonverbal communication, how you angle yourself in terms of conversations. We'll talk about jujitsu later, but you all know from kind of this way versus this way, it changes the dynamic of conversation. So all those things you sort of learn over time. And then how to put a bow on it would be just like jujitsu, right? For a minute, everything starts out with macro movements, big movements, big kind of macro things. You learn things from that perspective. And same thing in sales. You start off with, these large kind of macro concepts of, taking appointments or the sales cycles or all the different things that go into those components. And then as you get better and you build your base, everything becomes micro movements. Exactly where this arm should be, exactly where this should be, where to apply pressure, where there shouldn't be, where to use energy, where not to. And that same principle applies to your sales conversations and more importantly, your leadership conversations. Maybe I don't have to have this large, profound conversation with someone that works for you. It might just be something small based on what you've already built. So I really love that parallel between sort of macro and micro movements in the same context as sales development and also sales performance.
Love that you talk about the mirror effect because I used to do corporate training for power of persuasion, and we talked a lot about the mirroring of the other person to commit to create a connection. So if they are a slow thinking person, very thoughtful, you always need to be yourself, but you need to be a slower version of yourself and kind of mirror that. If somebody's a little bit very quick and they have a body language where they're moving around a lot, if you mirror that, that's a technique that creates an instant bond. Have you had the chance to read Cialdini's Power of Persuasion?
I think I have. I can't tell you any of the specifics about it, but I believe I've brushed that over the years.
That is a great book that talks about everything that gets somebody to feel connected to you and to open up to you and to get them to a place where they need to be. It's kind of like the whole position before submission. It's got all of that stuff in there. I'm sure you've learned this in your baptism by fire, but you talked about the ability to talk to people. That is something that is never really taught in high school or college, but it's probably one of the most important skills that somebody can develop to make the eye contact, to actually listen when you're talking to somebody, to actually first listen to what they're saying and understand it, repeat it back to them so they know that they've been heard. There's so much you could write a book just on that, the ability to talk to people. Tell me a little bit about how much that has helped you climb in your career to be a leader.
Oh, I mean, that probably underpins my entire journey and will underpin most of this conversation, right? So I want to skip ahead. I want to tell you a quick story around it, if I may.
Of
So
course.
I think around 2017, I remember one day, and it's very odd, right? But on Google Maps in the house I used to live in, the gentleman with the car that goes around and kind of takes the pictures for the neighborhoods for Google Maps, he happened to be there that day. So at one point, this moment was captured on camera just coincidentally. But I was walking my dog and I just had this profound moment to say, I'm going to change my leadership approach. I'm going to start to really bring myself to my role and really invoke jujitsu more in my conversations. Conversations about actual mat time and arm bars and all different things, but more so about the principles that was learned. And at that same time, I had asked our company let me back up. I asked our SVP and our VP for something like $150,000 to do this massive symposium with all of our dealers. And they gave us, and I got it approved, and they gave us free range on what we wanted to talk about for the dealers that we support at the time. And rather than bringing in very contemporary, sales performance or Excel spreadsheets or whatnot, so I'm going to do something very different. I'm going to talk about the human brain. I'm going to talk about how people operate. And so I really invoked kind of Simon Sinek, if you're familiar with him, and the Golden Circle. I really, really took that in when I listened to his podcast and read his book.
Can
That
you repeat that, please? I
yeah,
don't know that person.
yeah,
The
Simon Sinek, the
Simon
Sinek,
Sinek,
Sinek, Sinek.
Sinek, the Golden Circle.
Yeah,
Okay.
profound. Yeah. So not to get into tremendous amount of detail because I want to kind of land the story, but it's all about how if you want to work with people, you need to understand how people actually operate. So when you look at how people operate, decision making is not in the part of the brain where language is developed. It's in a more primal part of the brain where emotions are. So people only make decisions based off emotion, whether you purchase a car, whether you purchase something. And when I did this massive presentation in front of 300 people, I asked them very simple questions like, what was the last thing that you purchased that was big? Why would you buy this car versus this car? Why are you married to this person versus somebody else? And they always speak around the decision. They can't actually articulate the decision they're making. Why? Because it's in the part of the brain where emotions are. All that to say, once people have identified that you care, they don't care how much you know, they know how much you care. Once they've identified that they can trust you, they will run through a wall for you. And that's super critical. And that was sort of the point of it. So back to your question, that whole concept really unlocked things for me that year. And then kind of moving forward, I had developed multiple multi-unit leaders at that time. I had won a prestigious award that got me to Hawaii with only 400 people out of a company of 40,000. So a really big moment for me. And I attest a lot of that to those concepts that I had learned, from this golden circle approach.
I am definitely going to take a look at that Golden Circle, and our listeners should do the same. We'll put
Amazing.
in a link. We will put in a link at the bottom of this to that information for our listeners who want to check that out. I want to say it's amazing. Talk about coincidence. I'm reading this book right now. That's why I got up and you saw me leave the screen for a second. It's Daniel Kahneman, Pensar rápido, pensar despacio. I'm reading it in Spanish, but it's fast and think slow, think fast and slow. And he talks exactly about what you just said. He said there's two systems in the brain. This is fascinating. The first is called system one, which is your emotional, kind of subconscious, short cutting, make quick decisions based on emotion, feelings, and intuition. And then there's system two, that is your logical brain. And how much of our decisions are made on system one, the emotional, the intuitive part of our brain, and how to tap into that, how to control that. So the fact that you just brought that up, and I'm reading this book, is so coincidental in the power of people's quick intuitive decisions that they make and how you need to understand that to be successful. So I'm really excited
Frank,
to read the rest of this.
yeah, I do a lot of reading. I've always been sort of inquisitive. I remember my mother telling me I asked why all the time when I was a kid, which I thought was funny. And as I've grown up, I ask a lot of questions. And you'll start to see, if you start to look around, you'll start to see patterns everywhere.
Mm.
Patterns on the mat, right? With leadership, we'll talk about that this morning, but also in different books or, as you read different diet books, different exercise regimens or you'll find patterns out there that it's really interesting how they intertwine or they intersect without having any reason to, right? So you're reading a book from this gentleman versus, you might read any of these kind of contemporary or otherwise leadership books out there, you'll find parallels. They might say it differently, but you'll find that the construct is the same, which I find really unique and very interesting, right?
Yeah,
Not
in
to get
fact,
too deep, but yeah.
it fascinates me too. And I think a
Right.
lot of times, deep thinkers, the way I like to look at it is there's some universal truths about, for example, we're talking about human behavior right now. There's some universal truths. And deep thinking people who analyze, observe, and try to create a model to understand it, they look at this universal truth from different perspectives. It's three-dimensional.
Yes.
So when you're reading this guy, probably the golden circle has a different view of the same universal truth. And that's why you get that, that nexus where everything comes together. And it is a very cool feeling. It's a very neat thing, right? It's a little mysterious.
And that's the great thing about jiu-jitsu too. There's a lot of universal truths of jiu-jitsu that connect to your career. So hence the reason
Thus,
for
Yeah.
this
thus the
podcast.
show, right? Thus the show.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm
much,
I'm
so
so
much.
excited to talk about that. There's
Yeah. So
over time I've learned that. Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about your jujitsu. We see that you've been very, very successful in your career in operating not only in sales but in logistics and all those other things. Now tell us a little bit about how you got into jujitsu, why'd you get into it, and make some parallels to your journey getting up to brown belt, to your journey getting up
Yeah.
to a leader in the business field.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll talk a lot about ego, right?
Mm.
Ego with the yin to the yang of humility, which we've all learned on the mats, right? So I was never an athlete. I didn't really do much in the way of sports growing up, and you know, 2008, kind of before that time frame, I was a gym rat. I was in the gym all the time with my friends. 20-year-old guys, 30-year-old guys lifting weights, right? Lifting weights, and where I lived at the time in northern New Jersey, we had a school there called AMA Fight Club. So you have, at the time, Jim and Dan Miller, Jim still being in the UFC, and a bunch of fighters had been in that area. And I knew the owner. I had seen him at the gym and had some friends that were wrestlers, all those type of things. And that particular year, I was watching a lot of UFC, as most people do at the time. And I said, man, I just want to do something different. I think I could do this. Right? So I started doing a little bit of kickboxing, and I noticed very quickly I had super heavy feet. I was not very much of a dancer. I wasn't really comfortable doing that. So I said, let me do jujitsu. And I'm like, I can do this. I remember walking in day one, I'll try it out. I had on a Yankee shirt and sort of just khaki shorts. And I'm like, oh, this looks easy. And I start doing a shrimping drill. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. This is hard. Busted my foot. I remember he's like, "Oh, we're gonna do a takedown." Okay, get hip tossed, get the wind knocked out of me, and me like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to do this." And then I said to myself, "No, I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm gonna keep doing this." And from that day forward, I just never stopped. Injuries. Everyone gets bit. Torn meniscuses or whatever it might be. Everyone gets bit at some point, but I just never stopped going. There's been delays. I moved to a different part of New Jersey. I had two daughters, so I took some time off there, COVID, obviously. So, in that time, it's probably 5, 6 years off the mats, but outside of that, just, consistently going. But that's kind of how it started. And you learn really quickly that while I think I was 195 pounds, relatively strong at that time, to have 140-pound guys fold you up like a lawn chair and you have no idea what just happened. There was power in that. And rather than shying away from it, I grew a real respect for humility very quickly. So the ego of walking in and thinking you're, going to be strong And then you balance that against the principles of how leverage actually works and how timing works, was profound for me. And I've carried that humility through this entire time at work as well. I always say to people, there's always someone better than you. And for me, there's always people better than me in jiu-jitsu, without question. And at work, there's people better than you. But then you have to be okay with that. And at the same time, you have to be okay with that. If not, your ego will eat you up and you will start to make excuses for yourself. As an example, we'll have like leaderboards and I'll have people come to me that work on my team. Well, if this was this, then that would happen and I wouldn't be there. Right. And same thing happens in jiu-jitsu and we all do it. Well, I find myself doing it to this day, right? I'll be 50 years old this year. And I'm like, oh, well, if I was 10 years younger, and I try to catch myself saying it because at the end of the day, everyone's journey is different. Don't make excuses. It's okay if, the 30-year-old, 25-year-old kid comes in who wrestled and he's just working you over on the mat. Like, you got to be okay with that. If not, you're not going to want to come back. And that's when you have to determine what's your journey for, right? Are you trying to prove something or are you trying to preserve something? What is it you're trying to accomplish?
I like
So
that. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Joe, you talked about a story too in our pre-interview about being in the locker room, and
oh yeah,
you had a conversation with somebody. There's
yeah,
this cliche statement that we have in jiu-jitsu is like to embrace the suck. So, sometimes that statement is kind of very broad statement to kind of get people to understand that there is a process to learning in jiu-jitsu. But you had a profound example that you gave me about somebody's saying it's not that you suck, it's actually that you're not supposed to win, right?
right.
Can you talk a little bit about that story?
Yeah, absolutely. It was so impactful for me and actually I talked about that 2018 timeframe when things really started to unlock for me in my career and, had started to really build my brand and reputation. Well, one of the concepts I had created that I brought to work, literally brought it right to work was iron. I called it iron sharpening iron, right? Sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. So in this case, it was sharpening iron. So I had a particularly bad class. Things weren't clicking for me. And I think I was purple belt at the time. Maybe I forget exactly what it was. Either a four stripe blue or purple at the time, but there was a black belt I trained with. He was a smaller gentleman, maybe 145 pounds, and really technical, real good, real sharp, just took perfect angles. Everything was perfect that he did, like real geometry in his game, if you will. And he had just mercilessly tapped me over and over again in the session. So, you're not supposed to get frustrated. You're supposed to, all these things you're supposed to do, right? But we're humans. So we get off the mat, we go in the back of the locker room because our school is attached to a gym and there happened to be no one back there. And he just happened to be there, but I slammed the locker like hard because I was frustrated. And he turns, he's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Man, I'm just not getting any better. Like, I'm just not getting any better." And he looked at me and he's like, "Hey man," he's like, you're not supposed to." His exact words were something like, "You're not supposed to be getting better, right? You're training with people that are better than you. You're not supposed to win." That's all he said. It's like sage wisdom in the back of a locker room. And I stopped. I immediately like cooled down. I thought about what he said. As I drove home, I was like, "Man, wow." Like I started getting chills at the time. I remember getting chills at the time saying, "Wow, he's right. You really," when they say check your ego at the door, it's fun to put it on Instagram and have that be a statement. It's very different when you feel it and you acknowledge that that's real humility. And so I took that concept of like sharpening iron, where sometimes you're the nail, sometimes you're the hammer, to work and talked about it's okay if you're not winning in a certain category. Be humble, go reach out to that person that's doing better than you. Ask them what they're doing, right? Have them help you unlock yourself. It helps their brand, but you're also going to learn. If you don't do that and you continue to do what you're doing, you might get that same result, which we've all heard that sort of phrase before. So yeah, that was one of my most profound moments that specifically was a parallel between lessons on the mat and lessons in leadership.
Yeah, it's interesting how
Wow.
you went right back to the drawing board at work and started to apply that at your workplace. So that's really great.
I like the fact that you kind of distilled this idea where when somebody's doing something awesome instead of getting upset about it, being like, hey, you got to help me out. How are you doing that? What are you doing? Talk to me. Like, give me some insight into this stuff because you're doing great and you're doing what I want to do. So tell me how you're doing it. Finding almost a mentor, right? It's kind of making somebody your mentor. And a mentor doesn't have to be somebody a mentor for 5 years. It could be a mentor for a session, right? After a tough role like that.
Mm.
That's how
Yeah,
you learn.
we've done, mentorship, and like Saturday mornings right after this, I go help support the beginner class with one of our other professors. But I go there every Saturday. I don't ask anything at the gym for it. I just like to go help folks. And then when you're helping folks, you're also helping yourself, because in the context of just jujitsu, you then start to remember, oh, it's this versus that, and micro movements and helping support. But then just to have someone do something as a function of you helping them, it's why we should be here. And that goes back to sort of service leadership, and that's kind of the construct I work through, right? Kind of putting people in front, you're in the service of others, right? So
What is more difficult for you? Training or supervising and teaching and helping mentor new employees at a retail store, or white belts on the mat?
yeah, it, there it's the same thing, because you can't force growth. I can't make you go from white to purple overnight, right? So that's a really good question, because it lines up perfectly, right? You can't force growth. I often tell people, I'm going to tell you what you need to do. You need to figure out how to go do it. I talk about that distinction all the time. And sometimes it's trippy, because I'll look at someone's business plan they put forth for me in an interview or otherwise, and there's a lot of what in there, like what we're going to do. We're going to, as an example, we're going to create a culture, we're going to coach, we're going to develop, right? And I'm like, well, those are all what's. Like, how are you going to do it? And they look at me funny, because it's a difficult question to ask. Now, why is it difficult? Because sometimes you think, well, what I'm going to do is how I'm going to do it. But there is a distinction with a difference. And sometimes you're tapping into that emotional element, so you can't even really articulate it, right? Culture is a funny word, right? I don't like the word culture, because in some instances it's an abstract. In other instances, it's a non-tangible. It's what people are doing or what's occurring that's nonverbal. So if I walk into, like, I just did an interview last week and someone asked me what their expectation was. And I said, when I walk into the store, I'll know exactly what's going on just by everyone's nonverbal communication. I'll know exactly what's going on. I can even walk into a place and I can tell who the leader is right away, even if they're all wearing the same shirts. I can just tell by the way they move. Similarly, and you guys probably have spotted this, and tell me if you haven't. How many times have you been walking around in life, in an airport, and you'll see somebody not wearing a jiu-jitsu shirt, but they roll. You just know. That happened to me. I was coming back from Aruba, and I just happened to be sitting there. I'm always observant of people. And I just happened to be watching this guy who was with his wife and his kid. He was sort of walking back and forth. And he just had this sort of like very calm vibe to him. But beneath that veil of calmness, I could tell he's been through a little bit of war, a little bit. I could just tell. And I saw him on the plane. No ears or anything. I just walked by him. I said, "Hey man, do you roll?" He goes, "Yeah." So yeah, I could tell just by the way you were moving, and we both had a little chuckle about it. So, but yeah, back to what your question, right? You can't force growth. You have to give people the what, and then they have to struggle through the how. You set expectations, you provide feedback, you create accountability, you model those standards, you do all the things you talk about. Obviously, now we're talking about nuanced things that are different, right? We're not holding white belts accountable to things other than being respectful, showing up, things of that nature. The one, I'm not a, hard ass when it comes to rules per se, but, if you show up late to class, you kind of wait, those type of things, cleanliness. But the one thing I don't like, or one thing I will stick with in terms of rules, is if you're a white belt and you come strolling up, hey, you want to roll? Like, that's one thing I tell some of the new guys, hey, you don't, it's fine to ask for things, but that's one thing I do stick with. I think there's an element of rank and file there that I think is important. Same thing with new folks coming in. Hey, you gotta show up on time, right? You gotta, name badges, all those type of things. It's important, because if you're showing up late all the time, silly as it sounds, what else is going wrong, right? So those things are important, right? And then, lastly here, for this question, and I love this next kind of piece here. You always hear that, like, oh, failure is not an option. Failure is not an option. And I've tell people constantly throughout my career, or really in the last 10 years or so, like, no, it's the most readily available option. Like, it's the thing that happens the fastest. So from that concept, I kind of created this thought process on, I want you to prepare for failure, not to fail, but what happens if you do fail? Everyone knows what success looks like. You close your eyes, you're leading on a leaderboard, you're tapping people, whatever it might be, but you need to really appreciate what's going to go wrong. And you learn that acutely and broadly as you're starting jiu-jitsu, because someone at a higher rank there set up a trap for you and you think you're passing. Next thing you know, you're, in a bicep cutter or whatever it is. And then in sales, it's like, well, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to do that. And I always often tell people like, hey, I know what success looks like. I get that. I want you to reverse engineer your plan. Tell me what's going to go wrong. And once you think through that component, that will help you build new pathways for success. Now, that process is going to be uncomfortable. That's another thing I make a joke about. You see these on Instagram, you see these guys in the gyms, like, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah, awesome, right? Everyone thumbs up to that one. Till it actually happens. Till you're actually sitting there and you can't figure out what to do next. There's no support system potentially. You might show me this move 10 times and I still can't get it, or I can't get out of this move 10 times. Or I'm having difficult conversations, or I'm in a rut with performance and I'm like, I can't figure this out. If you stick with it, if you keep moving forward, even though you'll take a few steps back, that pain you go through, and sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's emotional, right? Pain's pain. You will develop thicker skin. You will not be worried about the bruises. You won't feel them. You won't be worried about mat burn. You don't feel it. Conversely, or in alignment with, leadership, you'll be better for having gone through that experience, right? I often tell folks, you're the hero in your own story. I just said this last week to people. I say it all the time. Hey, you're the hero in your own story. So let's take Superman, for example. If you have a Superman movie, if he came in and just kicked everyone's ass in 5 minutes, there's no movie. The movie's over. There's no movie. There's no human connection. There's no emotional connection to the story, right? You need emotional connection. So what happens? The superhero always goes through something, always has something they have to go through. And then the story begins with their climb out of that, right? And then we have like a documentation process we use here at work for all things, right? And I tell people, if you're the hero in your own story, expect to go through trials and tribulations. That documentation process, that's the script to your movie. That's what I tell people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Wow, that is deep. That's
It is.
another thing. You could write a whole book on that one concept. You're the hero of your own story. You really
Wow,
could. Think about that.
Yeah, in your line of work too, Joe, like technology is rapidly moving, right? So I can't imagine the amount of adaptations that you have to make in your line of work with changing technology all the time. And I like that correlation with that you mentioned on the mats too, when you were talking earlier about macro movements and micro movements. And that's what I was thinking of, is about problem solving on the mats versus, well, in correlation with problem solving in your job because of things changing constantly and rapidly. Can you talk a little bit about the connection there?
Yeah, I'll answer that question in the context of changes and how it impacts employees. So we go through insane, rapid change, like very uncomfortable change, as a function of just what needs to happen in the competitive landscape and just how we operate. So we acknowledge change as a leadership characteristic and principle, because you have to adopt so quickly. We often make a joke that, 3 years, a year at my company is like 7 years in the real world, because it's just the speed at which things move. So on that side of the question, it's more about the change is there. You have zero control over it. So I always tell people, when you have no control over something, there's not much to think about. There's no reason putting energy or mind space into something that you literally can't change. So more about how can you adapt to that change. And what I find now with the people in our organizations that are younger, and this is sort of the age difference now, I'm the person that says, whatever you put in front of me, the obstacle's away, right? You might have heard that term before. So I just run through it. Like, that's my whole thing. Where I find that people don't exactly always operate that way. And so they really need to appreciate why. They really need to understand why. And that's fair, except even though I might accept that why and then sort of move forward, what I'm finding is some of the folks that are, we work with that are of this generation, that might not be an acceptable answer to them. And they just can't get past it not being agreeable with whatever they think is what it should, whatever their construct is, right? So that's where mastery will come through repetitive process. It's just, you need to focus on the process, right? I'm finding most recently when we start driving too much pressure on performance without having a good process, that they'll reject it, or they'll get through it, but with a lot of fatigue. And so that's not good either. You get tipped off your axis that way. And so now, most recently, it's all about that process, clear expectations, support, what's going to happen, all these different things, how we observe people, not turning that process into a pejorative, right? Not threatening people with accountability or those type of things, right? Like, we want self accountability. It's the cleanest fuel source of accountability is self. Like, hey, I got this. I understand. I'm going to commit to moving this forward. That's what you want. That only happens if you set the temperature and the conditions, the culture, if you will, in a way where people feel that. So back to kind of that unlocking thing, right? So that's what I would say. In terms of on the mats, right? You guys both know there are times when you're caught in something and your brain says, "Oh, I want out of this," right? Fight or flight kicks in.
Mm.
The lizard brain kicks in, and I'm like, I can't move. So you start kind of jostling, but you're stuck, and you're like, oh no, the walls are closing in. I need to tap, right? And then and that's fair, right? Sometimes, I always say, like, you can get in and out of a submission. You can get in and out of any submission until it's too late to get in and out of any submission, right? But there are some times where you're in it and you're like, if I can just hang on another 5 seconds, the clock's going to go off, the round's going to end. And I need to prove to myself that, as uncomfortable this is, I can stay in this position. Not something damaging, right? Like, certainly don't do that with hooks or different things, but you're in a triangle or whatever. And yeah, it sucks. It's really terrible. The guy's bearing down on you. The lights are going out, right? But can you just hang on for a little bit more? Can you just wait and see if he gives you an inch to move out? That just happened to me the other night. I got caught I was chewing gum, and I was kind of more focused on my gum, not swallowing it, that I got caught in a triangle. And I'm like, let me just move just an inch here, right? Micro movements. And then I was in it for like 30 seconds. And I'm like, oh man, this is awful. And then I just felt him move a little bit, got my arm out, right? Put my shoulder out. And he acknowledged it in the middle of the round, right? So I find that to be the parallel. So it just goes back to the process. But back to what I said earlier, don't make excuses. Had I tapped, should I say it was the gum? Like, no, that's stupid, right? Like, that's what I was doing at the time, but that's not the reason I would have,
Mm.
got caught. I was, not doing what I should have been doing, right? So it's just about that process, creating those things, modeling the right things for your folks in terms of leadership. Back to nonverbal communication, people are watching what you do. When you're the leader, they're watching. I always tell my store managers, they're watching you. So if you walk in 7 minutes late, they think it's okay. You do this, they are watching. Nonverbal communication is, 75% of the game, right? So those are critical things, I'd say, to answer your question.
Yeah, trust the process, right, Frank?
100%.
Trust the process.
Process trumps results any day. Through that.
Yes, absolutely.
Hashtag veracity.
Veracity. Resilience, right? Resiliency.
Yes,
Yes,
indeed.
indeed.
Yeah, being able to adapt in the moment too in jiu-jitsu, you have to be able to adapt in the moment. And like, do you see that, like, in when you're training your sales people, that they have to try to stay calm and composed and be able to adapt in the moment? Because I'm sure, like, you have a customer in front of you at a desk, and you have to. I mean, I've heard sometimes customers working, yelling at some employees, and it's like they have to try to. I have to say, I've seen a lot of retail employees do a great job with that too, just keeping their composure and not getting too frazzled by people being angered at them, and being able to still adapt. So
It's really like back to the macro micro movements for a minute. I just literally had this conversation yesterday because someone was telling me they had a difficult situation the day before or whatnot. And I said, it's just as simple as not being squared up with the person, kind of be on an angle, using your hands to gesture. But even more beyond that, this will sound simple, but it's really powerful. Using the person's name. because they see your
Mm.
name tag, so they know who you are. But then you just use your name. So, Frank were to come in all upset. It's like, Frank, how can I help you? And using that person's name, I find that to be profound. Like we'll get sort of surveys, and generally speaking, when the person acknowledges the salesperson's name in the survey, it's always a high score. And that was profound for me to say, wait a minute, we're tapping into something here. Everyone wants to be spoken to in a way that's respectful and whatnot. But when they come in, they're directing their frustration at you because you're there, but it's not because of you. It's, in spite of you, if you will. They're almost speaking behind you, right? To this large company, right? But when you start to use their name now, and especially if you solve the issue or acknowledge and hold yourself accountable to like, hey, I'm responsible to fix this one way or the other. That whole process gets people to calm down because now you're using their name and they're using your name. And now, hey, I'm now dealing with Joe. I'm now dealing with Frank. I'm now dealing with Jason. I'm not dealing with whatever. And oddly enough, sometimes customers will ask for my information, and sometimes my stores don't want to give it. And I coach them really quick, like, hey, no, that's my role. Plus, if I can remove the obstacle for you, so you can go to your job, I'll gladly talk to customers.
Mm.
And I've never had an escalation go past me if I'm talking to that person for an hour, 3 hours, following up. I feel a sense of duty to be responsible for that scenario because after doing this for a long time, when I listen to people, I know I can tell, what that situation is, and I can put myself in their shoes about how frustrating it might be if someone says something to you and then it doesn't happen. There's some betrayal there that doesn't feel good. They'll use the word lied or something like that's really personal to me. Or the thing that frustrates me the most is when people have to go from store to store. I often use this analogy about if I went to Home Depot to buy something and something happened, and then they said, oh, you go back to the Home Depot and they say, oh, no, you got to go to this Home Depot. Like I would lose my mind. I would lose my mind, right? Like, no, I'm here. I don't want to go anywhere else. And this happens, this can happen at times in all different type of businesses, all different things. Like, oh, if you have a certain car and, oh no, we don't do this here. You need to go to that other dealership or whatever it is, right? That's frustrating, man. Like that's not a good experience. And as we move forward in retail, it has to be about the experience that you provide for people. You have to almost to the sense I made before, an emotional connection. I might talk to someone for 20 minutes. We're not going to be best friends, but I get to learn what they do. I get to learn a little about them, acknowledge that they're here, acknowledge they have choices to go other places, and create a place where, people feel good when they walk out the door. In the same way, when you choose a school that you go to or whatnot, that the conditions are there to where you want to come back. And you mentioned Professor Paul before. So he's our art instructor. He's not like me. I'm very talkative. He's more on the quiet side. And so he's different from me. And I appreciate that because when he does speak, I listen. And I don't mean just about jujitsu, but just certain things. It's different for me. And so I love that, right? I have a lot of respect for that in terms of his leadership on the mats, not only because he's the head guy and he's 55 steps ahead of me at all times, but just in the way he conducts himself, I really respect. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice for our listeners. Just say somebody's name. It's so simple, right? Just to say somebody's name. I'm going to use that advice as a coach on the mats with Frank when he's rolling with all of our guys in the mats. Because, Frank likes to talk smack a lot and he gets in positions and he starts talking smack. I'm just going to tell all the guys, like, just say his name, guys. Just say his name. He'll
Saying
calm
my
right down.
name, I'll calm down. Show me some respect. I am the clock burner. By the way, Joe, when you were talking about those last 5 minutes hanging in, you're gonna have to sign up for my clock burning tips. I burn at least as a 58-year-old guy. I'm gonna be 59 in August. I don't have the gas tank, so I am a professional clock burner. When we start, we slap and bump, and then I fix my
Clock burner.
gi. I fix my gi, tuck in the shirt a little bit. Hey, any injuries you have, talk it out a little bit. Make sure everybody's got a partner. Burn that clock because those last 5 seconds are the toughest.
That's what I was thinking
58.
about, Frank, when Joe was talking about being underneath somebody and just waiting for that clock to go off. And you just have a few seconds left. I'm like, oh, that'd be no problem. The clock would be going off pretty quickly if you were rolling with Frank anyway.
Our website is getting inundated with requests about Frank. give me your clock burning techniques. I too suffer. So
Effort.
we'll make sure you get a free copy of that
That's
when
awesome.
I the
That
clock
uh,
burn.
that last 5 seconds, it's silly as it sounds, and we're joking about it. But what's really impactful is you're not going to win, but you didn't lose, and that is a step forward,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. There are people I roll with that if I don't tap, I go home with a W. I'm like, or there's some people I roll with if I only tapped once, I'm like, oh man, you killed it today. That's sometimes you have to take your win as a yeah in
Uh,
that way because everything is like you said, everybody sucks compared to somebody else. There's always somebody that can just
Always,
manhandle you.
always.
And so when you get that person, there's a lot of them in my gym for me. When I get those people, I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to do my best to survive. And last time I got tapped twice. This time I got tapped once. That's a win for me,
Yeah,
right?
it is. I'll share with you guys, if I may, kind of in the concept of gratitude. I believe pressure is a privilege on the mats and in life. If you have pressure, that means something's expected of you, which is a important thing to have, self-worth and all the things that kind of come along with that. But to avoid it, to make excuses, you're not gonna really live a full life. It should be difficult, right? In that sense. And same thing at work. If you're not performing well and you're getting pressure, you should be grateful that someone cares enough to tell you that you're better than that. I just had that conversation with my boss recently. He's like, you should be this. This is your brand. And it was powerful. And I was like, I got to get back to work. Like so you have to I'm going through that right now. Right. Like, so it doesn't matter how many years, right? It's important. So
Yeah.
that pressure is a privilege. We're grateful to, as you get older, right, to be able to do these things, to continue to do this, right? I'm grateful for it for sure. I have gratitude for it, and that comes with that humility. You don't think through that when you're 20s, 30s, and all these things, but as you get older, it's such a privilege to be able to do it, right? It's such a privilege to be able to do these things. And I asked Master Renzo once. I said, "Hey, is jujitsu the journey or the destination?" And he said it's both. And I often think about, when I was a white belt, just the way my schools at the time, the white belts were in one room and then everyone else in the other room. I would just look in the other room and be like, I don't even know. Am I ever going to get there? Like I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to that other room. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And then it just kind of goes on and on and on. Right. So, and then he actually just showed up last week for some stripe promotions and he happened to be there. So he, he gave me the stripe. It wasn't his stripe. It was Professor Paul's, but he just happened to be there because it's his name on the door. So that was like a, super profound moment to talk to him for a minute. And, he's jujitsu royalty here, right? So that was awesome.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great mindset, Joe. Pressure is a privilege. I really like that.
That is that that's definitely a golden
Just
nugget in my
welcome it.
notes.
Welcome that pressure.
Damn.
A
So
lot of, a
many good,
lot of, a lot of great insight, huh, Frank, for our
yes,
listeners today.
a lot of awesome insights.
Yeah. So unfortunately, time is coming to an end here. So Frank, what time is it, Frank?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is your favorite time of the day. It's tap out time, where we wrap up all the golden nuggets of wisdom and hand them straight to our listeners. This one is going to be very difficult. You can see right here, if you're watching this, I have 5 pages of notes. And Joe, you have been very generous with us, sharing tactics, strategies, philosophy, and wisdom. And man, you've made so many connections. You've given us an encyclopedia of wisdoms that I'm going to try my best to summarize and give each piece its due. So let's start with, I love that you talked about the butterfly effect. It is definitely true that the wing of a butterfly on one side of the world can cause an earthquake on the other side of the world. Absolutely true. It's an amazing philosophy, and that's so cool how you met Mark in a kiosk and that launched you into your career. You wouldn't be on this show right now if you didn't see Mark back in 1999. Think about that.
Actually,
Butterfly effect. Proven, case in point. One of the things I really liked that you talked about is something that's never taught in college, never taught by people, but the ability to talk to people. The ability to connect with people is in business and in life is probably your most important asset. And that ability to communicate, make eye contact, body language, nonverbal, all of that stuff, using somebody's name is magic. I just want to say, I really shouldn't like editorialize at this point because I'm summarizing, but I want to say one quick thing about your comment about names. When I had my own business, I did a lot of consulting and I would talk to people high up in the companies, a lot of CEOs, directors of marketing, and I noticed every one of the top brass always when I was talking to them, they would always universally, every one of them without exception, insert my name in there. They would say something like, Frank, one of our challenges right now is managing the changing landscape. And Frank, in these situations with a lot of fluid changes, there's a lot of people who are uncomfortable. They used my name like twice in that one sentence, and I always noticed that. So that was a great pickup on your part. Magic, that is a magic bullet right there. Use people's names and insert them in the middle of your sentences, and you will connect instantly with that person. Other things that you talked about. I liked your macro concepts in the beginning, and as you move forward, using micro concepts and micro movements is how we learn jujitsu. 100%, and how we get good at anything in business with our careers. Learn the fundamentals, learn the basics, and then you can polish them. The power of those macro concepts being polished is really the journey to success in any endeavor that you undertake. I am definitely going to look up Simon
Sinek.
Sinek, the Golden Circle. So our listeners should definitely do that. You talked about the power of emotion. And in my marketing class, I talk about that all the time. People buy on feelings. I don't care if you're a chemical engineer, you buy on your feelings. And people make decisions on their system one emotional level. And if you can't control the emotional level that you're speaking at, if you can't connect on that intuitive level, you will never be successful. These nuances are the most important in business. And thank you for pointing that out. You talked a lot about ego, and every single guest on our program has talked about ego and its dangers and how you need to leave it at the door. You talked about being 190 pounds, yet a 140-pound guy can fold you up in a pretzel, and how that has actually helped you because you're an open-minded person. A lot of people go into jujitsu as big guys. They get folded like a lawn chair and they never come back because they're humiliated. There's humility, but there's no humiliation, right? That's how you get better. You talked about consistency, coming back over and over. I love that you talked about the fact that there's always someone better than you. It brings me to the quote that comparison is the thief of joy. You're on your own journey. You compare yourself to yesterday's you. There's always somebody better. And if you understand that there's always somebody better, then all of a sudden, everybody, maybe except the undefeated guy, except Khabib, everybody sucks compared to somebody else. And if you know that and accept that, you stop comparing yourself to that guy. You compare yourself to you. You talked about, you made a quote, you're not supposed to win. And in many cases in life, you're not supposed to win because your deepest lessons come from those. So much stuff that you talked about. You said something that everybody should be listening to. And you know what? Every successful person on our show has said the same thing. When you're helping people, you're also helping yourself. Service leadership. Jason, I think every guest that we've had on this show does something good for other people. The top echelon of winners in life in business and jiu-jitsu are always looking to help other people. So love that point. Oh man, another great quote. And I'm a teacher, so I really appreciate this. You said you can't force growth. That every teacher in the world, every jujitsu coach, every coach, trainer, and teacher, I love that. You can't force growth, but you can foster it. You can foster growth by giving your students the tools they need and the ideas and the mindset they need. And then they have to figure out the how. Failure is the most readily available option in jiu-jitsu and in sales and really in life, right? You talked about how consistency pays. You talked about mindset. You must read the Stoics because you talk
Yes.
about the Stoics, and I love that you do that. Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius.
Hmm.
You talked about this probably is the most important thing that everybody should take from, I feel, as a teacher. You said that a lot of the young people, they look at the obstacle and they ask, but why? But that isn't fair. They make judgments about it. It shouldn't be. And they might be right. It shouldn't be. But you're really right in the end when you say, but it is. And but you can't change it. So accept the log that fell in the path, accept that it fell there. Don't curse Mother Nature for making the wind that made the tree fall in the path. Say, it is there, and I'm going to burn it for fuel that's going to become my way.
Right on.
And
Love
man,
it.
Right
you are
on.
definitely a philosophical guy. I love that.
That
And
is deep.
that will help you in jujitsu and in life. And the last, I mean, I have a lot more. I'm not going through all of them, but the last thing I love that you said for any leader, I'm a teacher. I have 150 kids, and I believe you when you say you are modeling. I cannot come in looking like a slob. I cannot come in late. I have to speak with respect. I can't lose my temper because I am the model of leadership that I want my kids. I can't have a bad day. I can't do that. And every leader, whether you're a teacher or a jujitsu trainer or a leader in a corporation, every day when you walk in, how you dress, how you comport yourself, how you treat others, it's being watched and absorbed by your entire team. And everything has to be meticulously managed so that your people have a model to grow into. And that was another brilliant thing that could be a book. So you just basically gave us like 7 different titles of 7 different books wrapped up all within an hour. So thank you, Joe, for sharing all of that knowledge in such a fluid flow roll method way. We really appreciate it. My listeners appreciate it. Oh, I have to say one more thing. You use the word pejorative as the process is more important than the result, but don't use the process as pejorative. That is absolutely true to get the best out of your team. But pejorative was one of my word of the days for my students. And they're going to be listening to this. And they always look at me like, Mr. D'Amelio, like, when are we going to? No, there it is. There it is. A savage brown belt. Just used it. So, kids, vocab counts. Keep studying your vocab. Great job, Joe. Thank you so much for all that wisdom. That was a really long wrap up, but you gave us so much to talk.
Yeah, Frank, you get away with words. I was inspired by your summary there. That was well done.
Inspired by your own thoughts. See, when somebody distills them and puts them on a plate, you can see how much you have actually learned
Yeah,
in your journey.
we didn't talk Stoics, but you probably picked up on a few of those sort of components, and you summarized it well. I looked at Jason, and we were both smiling when you mentioned the wood burning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was well done. I speak in
Love it.
metaphor quite often, and that was from metaphor to metaphor. Well done.
I definitely appreciate that. And certainly on the mats, I have a lot of those logs to burn. A lot of
Yeah.
fuel.
You guys make me want to come up and train there. You guys at the same place, different places?
We're the same.
Same. Yeah.
Jason's my coach. Yes.
Oh, I should have known that.
Yes.
I
No, that's
apologize. Yep.
okay.
Yeah.
No
Okay.
Yeah.
worries.
If you're ever up in the Boston area, Joe, shoot us a message and come by. Definitely.
Yes. We would
Yeah,
love to
I'll
roll
look
with
at that.
you.
Yeah, man,
And
I would love to come up there for sure.
and also we'll roll and then we'll take the Boston's about an hour away from us by car. We'll bring you to Boston. We'll show you the beautiful city.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
been there. Yeah, been there a bunch of times. Oddly enough, there's this steakhouse, Boston Chop. You might know where it is, South Boston.
I don't think I've been there.
Weird story, right? I have a long kind of last name that ends in a vowel. I'm eating dinner one day, and I look at the menu, and they have a dish that's called Giannone chicken. I'm
No
like,
way.
what? Like, I'm like, wait, and I'm like,
That's
I'm not.
my
I haven't. What's going on? Like, it's strange, right? So I walk right up to the maitre d, and I'm like, what's this? And he goes, it's a famous chicken farm, not famous, but a well-known chicken farm in New England. They have like the best chickens. And then when I looked, it was like trademarked. I'm like, that's my last name. And he's like, but you're not from here. I said, no. He's like, oh, well, maybe you have a relative that's into chickens. I'm like, it's super random,
I
super
hope
weird.
you got that meal for free. I mean, your name's on it.
I didn't. I ordered steak because I'm at a steakhouse, but I took a picture of it because I thought it was It's not something it wasn't on my bingo card to have my last name on a chicken dish in a well-known steakhouse in downtown Boston.
That's definitely a cool story.
Yeah.
Again, with that mysterious thing, how things come together, right? How the universe
Patterns, man. Gotta look for them.
pattern. Yeah, they're there.
Exactly right.
They're there.
Awesome, guys.
So our call to action today for our listeners, check as this is a shout out to the Renzo Gracie Academy in Middletown. Share anybody from the Renzo Gracie Academy in Middletown. I know Joe has a few daughters that also train there too, Joe mentioned. So I'm sure he's involved in the kids classes and knows a lot of the parents of the children that take classes there too. So please share Joe's podcast because it's very insightful.
Yes, it's a master class in philosophy, strategy, and tactics, all wrapped up in an hour. So definitely take advantage of that and share it with everybody. Oh man, that was so much fun. I am now fully inspired, ready for my weekend.
Awesome.
All right, have good rolls today, Joe. Enjoy your rolls.
Listen, before I go, I just wanted to say thank you guys for the opportunity. It was a flow roll. That's kind of interesting how you put it that way. I felt that it's a great conversation. I love what you guys are doing. I think if any of these conversations, mine, the ones you had before, the hundreds you'll have in the future, you guys are, no pun intended, tapping into something here that people need to hear, see. Maybe we get someone to go join Jiu-Jitsu. Like, man, I didn't realize these guys, I just thought they were rolling around in, heavy pajamas. I didn't know there was all this wisdom on the mats, right?
Right.
And or it helps unlock something for them, then all the better. But just thank you guys. It's I'm super grateful to even be able to talk to you guys this morning. So thank you so much.
Thank
Gratitude
you as well, Joe.
is likewise.
Awesome.
All right,
Enjoy.
take care, guys.
Take care, guys.
Be good.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. As we wrap up today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on the powerful connections we've explored between the art of Jiu-Jitsu and your career. In your workplace and in Jiu-Jitsu, you learn to adapt and navigate challenges. So remember that persistence and the courage to embrace the lessons that you learn are the keys to your growth both on the mat and in your career.